Great. Hi everyone, my name's Chris McKee. I am the Industrial Partnerships Officer based in Leeds. I actually work for multiple groups in Leeds, but today I wanted to talk to you specifically about the Leeds In Vitro Diagnostics Cooperative, otherwise known as the Leeds MIC, which it has the Director of Operations, who is Helen Radford, who sadly can't be here with us today. So the first question that people often ask is, what technically is an in vitro diagnostic? So by definition, an in vitro diagnostic to us is a medical device or an accessory which is used on samples acquired from taken away from the human body, such as blood, urine or tissue or anything else really in that space, which is used to help detect infection, diagnose a medical condition, look at preventing disease or monitor drug therapy treatments throughout treatment pathways. So the overall scope of the Leeds MIC is to build expertise and capacity in the NHS to provide evidence on commercially supplied in vitro diagnostic tests. But what does this actually mean, and what are our aims? So our aims really are to act as a catalyst for yourselves, and we want to generate high quality evidence of clinical validity, utility, the cost effectiveness of your products, looking at the care pathway benefits in the long term, like you heard from Pippa before, and also look at all commercially supplied in vitro diagnostic tests. We are in the business of enabling collaboration with multiple collaborative partners, whether that is between industry, such as yourselves in the audience, clinicians, healthcare professionals, academic researchers. We're very, very strongly linked to the local universities, particularly the University of Leeds, and also we can provide health economics and patient group assessments. The whole purpose of this is to create new world-class methodologies for IVD assessment here in the UK. We work with patients, academics and industry partners, as previously mentioned, ultimately to shape our current strategies and develop them and identify new opportunities for yourselves and also address current needs within the NHS. So the team within the Leeds MIC actually came up with this program, and you can see this on our website if you want to get this in greater detail. But it's something called the IVD Accelerator. And this was an interesting way of looking at our current pathway, at least within the Leeds MIC, where we identify a clinical need and link them up to new diagnostic technologies which you may be providing. And then we bring them together to do some early modelling to look at the commercial viability and also the NHS opportunity of your products. We will then move along to measure the validity in the clinic and also the efficacy and the utility of your product, utilising our expertise across a range of different areas, including precision medicine research infrastructures, where we have access to patient cohorts, we have access to biobanks, we have access to big data. Leeds actually has a very, very expansive electronic healthcare record, and also our pathology services are now completely digital within Leeds. We have a wealth of methodological expertise, health economics, informatics, med statistics. We can take you through the whole pathway, and we do often look at artificial intelligence as well, as long as it ultimately links in with an in vitro diagnostic test. The overall purpose of this is to actually disseminate and adopt your product with an ultimate goal of assessing patient benefit and also economic value to the NHS, or something that we refer to as health and wealth. So what are our themes, and who actually works with the MIC, and who will you be working with if you join up with us? So if you're interested in the space of diagnostics in renal medicine, it'll be with Dr. Andy Lewington. He's particularly interested in diagnosing acute kidney injury, chronic kidney disease, kidney transplantation. We also have an expert in infection diagnostics, Professor Mark Wilcox. He wants to diagnose infections quite early on. He's particularly interested in sepsis, for example, but he also wants to establish how novel in vitro diagnostic technologies can be used for focusing antibiotic treatments to make sure that people are getting the right antibiotics for the disease that we're focusing on, and also to have a look at new antibiotics being applied in the clinic. We have an expert in oncology, Professor Matt Seymour. He's particularly interested in renal, prostate, colorectal, multiple myeloma, and also looking at some primary care point of care tests. And finally, we have our expert in musculoskeletal disease, Professor Paul Emery. He's particularly interested in rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma and osteoarthritis, but also any other immune-mediated inflammatory disease, he will also be interested in working with yourselves. In addition to our clinical themes, we also have our methodological expertise themes, and these are just as important, I think, and this also shows you an additional service that we can provide to yourselves. So we have our health economics group, a very professional group led by Dr. Bess Shinkins, and we will typically perform a health economics assessment throughout the life cycle of working with companies such as yourselves. We undergo health informatics with Dr. Jeff Hall. He's also responsible for a large portion of our Leeds electronic healthcare record and establishing that network. We help with clinical trial setups, which is headed by Professor Jane Nixon, and also we have a multidisciplinary pathology group, and this is actually under Professor Peter Quirk. So the MICs themselves have got several successful case studies, and the Leeds MIC is no exception to that. But I wanted to focus on one particular example over the past 2 years, which has been of a particular success for us. So Dr. Andy Lewington and his team came across an unmet need in the area of renal medicine, whereby you had to the current process at least for identifying patients with pre-existing chronic kidney disease prior to iodinated contrast imaging diagnostics is quite poor, and so we needed to establish a new system for diagnosing these patients, preferably within radiology. Now, the reason for this is these patients with CKD have a high risk of developing acute kidney injury after undergoing a CT scan using this method. So the first step was to actually identify technology that we could use in this space. And so they went ahead, at least in this paper, with a technology provided by Nova, Radiometer and Abbott, the STAT sensor, the ABL 800 Flex and the iStat. And the purpose of using these point-of-care tests was to see if they would actually have any concordance with the current laboratory test, which is to test for creatinine. And this is typically done in a lab, and it's not necessarily the most efficient of processes, and it can often be done quite a bit before someone's actually going in for a CT scan, and is often missed as a post-CT assessment for these patients. So they assessed all three of these devices, and they actually found the ABL 800 Flex device, which is the one in the middle, had the highest concordance with the routine lab test supplied by Siemens. The iStat came in as a close second, and then third was STAT sensor. But what was of particular interest is all of the high-risk patients that were identified in this publication by the routine lab test were also identified by the ABL 800 Flex and the iStat, and were found to be just as effective at a point of care. So the next stage after actually identifying the devices was to actually apply this into a clinical setting. So this was to apply this directly within the radiology clinic. And so a feasibility study was then undertaken in which they were assessing patients at that point of time using the point of care test, both pre and post CT scanning. And what was interesting about this paper, which feel free to read up on, is they found that within this feasibility test, they were successful, and they could show successful implementation of what we actually used was the iStat, and it was successfully implemented in the radiology clinic. I think of interest to you all is that actually all of these devices were pre-approved by NICE for testing creatinine, and the next stage actually of all of this is to look at NICE clinical implementation of the devices, particularly the iStat, within radiology, including a health economics assessment and a clinical validity assessment, which is going to be published in November and is currently just awaiting review. So keep your eye out for that, because that will be coming out very soon and is a very good case study for the mix. So as you can tell, we are here to work with you and also support your access to the clinical expertise that we have in Leeds, and we have a very large teaching hospital trust in Leeds, one of the bigger ones in the country, including multidisciplinary pathology linked with this. We can acquire patients for you, the samples that you require, we have real-time data available to you, and also we can set up your clinical studies and clinical trials. In terms of methodological expertise, as you've already seen, we can take you through the whole process of giving you metrological advice, health economics advice, design your trials with you, and also look at the informatics. So quite simply, just come collaborate with us. We want to know what your technology is and we'll work together with you. It's a very simple process for us. You can either do this directly through our website, or you can email Helen directly, or the actual Mick email directly. We typically send out a 2-page expression of interest form where you can actually pitch your case to us, and we can also put non-disclosure agreements in place prior to this if you're worried about that. This is actually peer-reviewed amongst our entire team within Leeds, and we usually get these comments back to you within 2 weeks, just so we can really focus your technology and identify the clinical need for yourselves. So all of our team members are involved in this scoping, and we can decide a plan of action for you and the possible next steps. So I'd be more than happy to take any of your questions outside, and I look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.